Hey friend, welcome to Wading Deeper, day 108. Thank you so much for taking the time to bop over here. I appreciate it so very much. I wanted to bring to you some information today in regards to Psalm 108, because as I was reading it in preparation for recording the Bible reading for today, I started kind of asking some questions, getting some questions in my mind, and ended up going down this 2.5, 3 hour rabbit trail and wrote copious notes. And they're so interesting to me, and they have a very great point at the end. It's like the big, huge, all caps, multiple exclamation points, ha, at the very, very end, that I thought, you know what, I am just going to record a Wading Deeper for those who want to go a little bit deeper into one verse of Psalm 108. So come along with me and join me, and I'll try to be as entertaining as possible to hold your attention. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to read Psalm 108, and then I'm going to talk to you about just briefly about the couple things that were some of the big questions that I started having. And then I would love to share with you what I learned. So it's completely fascinating. I think it's wonderfully brilliant, and nothing that I concocted or anything, just what I learned from digging around and doing some research. So let's dive in and wade a little bit deeper. Okay, so Psalm 108, we're now in the fifth and final book of the Psalms. And this is a song and a psalm of David. So we just read about all the kings, and we know that Saul was the first king, David was the second king. So we kind of have to go back in time a little bit, because today we just finished 2 Kings. We finished reading about the kings, and we're going to be jumping into the prophets, which I think what I'm going to do is then take you back a little bit and kind of touch base in 1st and 2nd Kings, if I can find what that prophet is talking about, so that we can kind of have this concept and this understanding of the time and the timeline of everything. So put yourself back in the time period of King David when we're reading this psalm, okay? I know you're probably like, well, what date is that? I don't know. I did not do that research, so forgive me. But let me read Psalm 108, and then I will share with you what I learned. David says, "My heart is confident in you, O God. No wonder I can sing your praises with all of my heart. Wake up, lyre and harp. I will wake the dawn with my song. I will thank you, Lord, among all the peoples. I will sing your praises among the nations. For your unfailing love is higher than the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the highest heavens. May your glory shine over all the earth. Now, rescue your beloved people. Answer and save us by your power. God has promised this by his holiness." And this is what grabbed me. 7, 8, and 9. God has promised this by his holiness. Quote, this should be God talking. God says, "I will divide up Shechem with joy. I will measure out the valley of Sukkoth. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh too. Ephraim, my helmet, will produce my warriors, and Judah, my scepter, will produce my kings. But Moab, my wash basin, will become my servant, and I will wipe my feet on Edom and shout in triumph over Philistia." End of quote. Who will bring me into the fortified city? Who will bring me victory over Edom? Have you rejected us, O God? Will you no longer march with our enemies? Oh, please help us against our... Oh, excuse me. I really read that incorrectly. I thought that was like, what's wrong with what I just read? Go back to verse 11. Will you reject us? Have you rejected us, O God? Will you no longer march with our armies? Forgive me. Verse 12. Oh, please help us against our enemies, for all human help is useless. With God's help, we will do mighty things, for he will trample down our foes. Okay, so at the time of David's writing this, Moab, Edom, and Philistia were threats. Okay, Moab, Edom, Philistia. So I started thinking to myself, here is David, and he's pleading to the Lord. He is saying, who will bring me victory over Edom? Have you rejected us, O God? Please help us against our enemies. And he's asking God, divine God. He's not asking his friend next door. He says, for all human help is useless. With God's help, we will do mighty things, for he will trample down our foes. Now, what I'm going to share with you is a little bit about Moab, Edom, and Philistia. And I really am excited to share this with you, because what I'm going to share with you, David never saw happen with his own eyes. All right? But we have seen the end, and we saw what happened. We know what happened to Moab. We know what happens to Edom. We know what happens to Philistia. These three, they're not countries, okay? They're not. These three people groups, and they're classified a little bit different from each other. We'll get there in a minute, that are against Israel. So we're going to talk kind of about four people groups. We're going to talk about Moab, Edom, Philistia, and Israel. David, unless he knows in heaven, he does not know which I'm sure he does know in heaven, but when he was on this planet, he did not find out what happened to Moab, Edom, and Philistia. Okay, I've said that 1,000 times. Get into it, Becky. All right, so here we go. So during the reign of King David, some of the places listed in verses 7 and 9 were were regions, can't even read my own handwriting, regions or tribes within Israel, while others were neighboring enemy nations. So in Psalm 108, 7 through 9, Shechem and Sukkoth were places within the land connected to Israel. Gilead was a territory in Israel east of Jordan, the Jordan River. Manasseh and Ephraim and Judah were tribes of Israel. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but we've read about them. We learned about them. Moab, Edom, and Philistia were neighboring nations that often fought against Israel. So let's talk and remind ourselves about Moab. Moab, the story about Moab, if you remember correctly, is found in Genesis, where Lot's daughters believed that they were among the last people left alive after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you remember, Lot was drunk and the daughters went in and they had relations with their father, and both of the daughters had children. It turns out that the older daughter's son was named Moab, and he is the father of the Moabites. We read about this already back in Genesis. So Moab was founded by the man Moab. He was the son born to Lot and Lot's oldest daughter after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. I'm going to call him Mr. Moab here. Mr. Moab became the ancestors of the Moabite people and nation. Now let's remember and review that Lot was Abraham's nephew. So the Moabite people, the Moabites, were actually distant relatives of Israel. They were related. So why go against them? Why bother them? Why attack them? More information. The ancient land of Moab is in the modern day country of Jordan. So that is east of Israel. If you look on a map, east and south, especially the area east of the Dead Sea. Although the Bible doesn't definitively say whether God looked favorably upon Lot's daughter's actions, I think that from what you and I have learned in Deuteronomy and in the law given to Moses, we can all agree that God emphatically would not have looked favorably upon incest between father and daughter. Perhaps that is why in Psalm 108, verse 9, God says that Moab, his wash basin, will become his servant. So in that verse, just with those words, it basically means that Moab is humbled into the place of a servant. Okay? So that's why Moab is brought in. All right? So you kind of, I think about like, how would the consequences have been different if the daughters hadn't had done that? Oh, give me 1 second. Here's the sneeze. Okay. So, because I was thinking, why did God even refer to Moab there? Moab will become my wash basin. It basically means that Moab, you know, God is prophetically saying Moab is going to be humbled into the place of a servant. All right, you with me? Hang in there. This is really interesting. It's all going to get tied together really cool in the end. Now, Edom, as you remember, Edom was founded by Esau. Esau, the brother of Jacob and the son of Isaac and Rebekah. Remember that? So Esau was also called Edom, which means red. That's how Edom gets its name. His descendants became the Edomites and settled in the hill country south of the Dead Sea. The Edomites were also closely related to Israel because Esau and Jacob were twin brothers, like I said. Jacob became the father of Israel, while Esau became the father of the Edomites. Edom had a long history of hostility toward Israel. The Edomites, descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, often acted like enemies towards Israel instead of family, which to me is kind of interesting because of Esau and Jacob's relationship. If you remember, Jacob was the younger brother, and he ended up tricking his older brother, Esau, basically sold his birthright for a bowl of stew. Wasn't it a bowl of stew? And then Jacob ended up tricking his father, Isaac, into giving him the blessing of the birthright. And there was that whole story in that situation. So although Jacob went away for a long while and then came back, and it kind of sounded like he and Esau, you know, had repaired and mended the fences. But, you know, maybe there was still this bit of root, you know, this root of bitterness. Another thing that caused problems in their relationship was another major grievance. And that was when Edom refused to let the Israelites pass through their land during the Exodus. Do you remember that? So they asked, can we pass through your land? You know, we promise not to harm anything. And they basically said no. So it's kind of like, well, thanks so much. Remember, they had to kind of go the long way route. Later, Edom fought against Israel repeatedly. But by David's time, Edom had become one of the nations opposing Israel. David eventually conquered them and placed garrisons there. Now, this was very interesting. Listen to this. So we read in Psalm 108, it says that God says, quote, I will wipe my feet on Edom. Now, in the original Hebrew, this is interesting, it says very literally, the translation in the original Hebrew is, quote, upon Edom, I, God, cast or throw my shoe, or cast or throw my sandal. So upon Edom, I cast my shoe. This, again, is a picture of being humbled. Edom is being humbled, conquered, and reduced to servanthood. In the ancient world, and I've actually seen this in modern times, throwing a sandal at someone could symbolize domination, ownership, or treating them like a servant who carries or cleans your shoes. Okay, so I've seen in another, I do not believe they were Israeli, but in another Arabic family, the mother would take off her shoe and whack the son when he was disobedient or something. So it wasn't her shoe, it was actually her sandal. So I think that's a thing. Now, the phrase is not mainly about God randomly disliking Edom. It basically reflects Edom's pride and Edom's opposition to Israel and long-standing resistance to God's people, their relatives. Okay, so that's Edom. We talked about Moab, Edom, and now I want to talk about Philistia. Now, Philistia was the third place mentioned in Psalm 108, verse 9. And Philistia, is important to note, it was not ever a nation in the same centralized sense as a kingdom like Israel or Moab. Philistia is more of a confederation of 5 major city-states, okay? And those city-states were and are, because some of them are still today, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. I know Gaza is for sure because we've heard a lot about Gaza over the past couple of years in relation to Hamas. I did not do my research onto which of those cities are still actual cities, so forgive me for that. But each city in ancient times had its own ruler, but they often would act together militarily and politically. So Philistia was a real political entity, but it functioned more like a loose alliance of city-states than a single unified kingdom. The Bible refers to Philistia as a land or people group with enough unity to fight wars against Israel. So there was organization there. The Philistines were constantly attacking Israel for a couple reasons. First, they lived very close to Israel along the southern Mediterranean coast in city-states, as we've already said, such as Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath, and Ekron. Israel and Philistia were neighboring peoples competing for the same land, for trade routes, and military control. Second, the Philistines were a powerful military culture. They had chariots, metal weapons, and, like I've already stated, city-states. For long periods of time, the Philistines actually dominated parts of Israel. In the days of Saul, for example, the first king, Saul the first king, they even controlled blacksmithing so that Israelites could not easily make weapons. Now, from the biblical perspective, there was also a spiritual reason that they wanted to attack Israel so much. Israel believed that God had given them the land, while the Philistines worshipped other gods like Dagon, and the Philistines resisted Israel's presence. So the conflict was not only political and military, it was also seen as a clash between Israel's covenant with God and the pagan religions of the surrounding nations. This is why the Philistines show up over and over again in the Bible in the stories of Samson, Saul, David, and Goliath, and later kings. They were one of Israel's longest lasting enemies until David finally subdued them. So then I thought to myself, well, what happened to the Philistines? Well, here's what happened. So listen closely. The Philistines gradually disappeared rather than ended on one exact date. Their cities were conquered by the Assyrians and then heavily destroyed by the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar II around 604 BC. Many Philistines were killed, exiled, or absorbed into other populations. After that, they continued for a time as scattered people, but no longer as an independent Philistine society. By the late 500s BC to late 400s BC, they had lost their separate ethnic identity and disappeared from history as a distinct people group. Now, put a pin in that. What happened to Moab and the Moabites? Well, guess what? Moab also gradually disappeared as a distinct nation and people. After spending time under Assyrian control, Moab was conquered by the Babylonians around 582 BC, only a few years after Jerusalem fell. And we haven't gotten there yet, but we're getting there. After that, the Moabites faded from history as an identifiable people group. Their land was eventually taken over by other groups, especially the Nabateans. And haven't we heard about them before? Yes, we have. And later, they became a part of larger empires. Now, let's review the Nabateans. The Nabateans were the people who built and developed Petra. They settled there around the 4th century BC and turned Petra into the capital of their kingdom and into a major trade center. The Nabateans were especially known for carving buildings directly into the red sandstone cliffs and for creating sophisticated water systems that allowed a large city to survive in the desert. And if you have not Googled Petra and the cliffs, you must Google them. And you must look at how beautiful and incredible they are and do a little research on your own. It is suspected and wondered that during the 7-year tribulation, when the Jewish people have to finally flee, that Petra might be one of the places where they flee to hide from the Antichrist and the beast. And now let me kind of finish up with the Nabateans. By around 300 BC, the Nabateans were firmly established in the area around Petra and had taken over territory that had previously belonged to the Edomites. Petra remained the Nabatean capital until the Romans took over their kingdom in 106 AD. And just for a reminder, the Nabateans and Petra are in Jordan, right? So Moab is now modern day Jordan is Moab. I think I said that. Anyway, turning the page, we're getting close to the big aha moment. At least it's big to me. What happened to the Edomites? Well, the Edomites were gradually, I'm so sorry. We were just talking about, under Assyria, the Moabites. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, they had taken over territory that had previously belonged to the Edomites. Have I talked about the Edomites? Oh, blast. Okay. All right. Okay, so sorry, everyone. So what happened to the Edomites? The Edomites were gradually conquered, displaced, and absorbed into other people groups as well. After the Babylonian period in the 500 BCs, Edom lost control of its homeland south of the Dead Sea. Arab groups, especially the Nabateans again, moved into their territory, and many Edomites were pushed west into southern Judah. There, they became known as Edomians. Later, during the Hasmonean period around the 2nd century BC, don't disappear on me here, many Edomians were absorbed into Jewish society. By the time of the New Testament, Herod the Great, an important figure in the New Testament in the story of Jesus, was of Edomian Edomite background. Okay, just put a pin in that one. After the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Edomians disappear from history as a distinct people group, and over time they blend into surrounding populations. So the Edomites also were not wiped out all at once. They slowly lost their land, identity, and separate culture over several centuries. Now, all three of these ancient people groups, Edom, Moab, and Philistia, the groups that David is saying here, who will bring me victory over Edom? Please help us against our enemies. God, please. All three of these groups eventually fade away and disappear, and never, ever, ever have they reemerged as distinct nations or ethnic groups after their disappearance. They're done. They're gone. David never saw that, but that's what happened to these people groups. Okay? But Israel, who was the nation that they were attacking and fighting and coming up against, did re-emerge as a distinct ethnic and religious people even after losing political control of their land as an ancient peoples. So when did that happen? We haven't necessarily read that yet, but I'm going to read it in the Bible yet, but I'm going to tell you now, little foreshadowing. The northern kingdom of Israel was conquered by Assyria in 722 BC. I think we might have read that. They were taken off into exile. Remember that? I didn't really touch on it too much or talk about it, but I'll start doing that. And the southern kingdom of Judah was conquered by Babylon in 586 BC. So, even while they're in exile, and even after their exile, the Jewish people maintained their identity through, how did they maintain their identity? Through their religion, through their scriptures, through their traditions, through their family lines, and their connections to the land of Israel. So we're getting into the aha moment, okay? Their religion, their scriptures, God gave them their scriptures, the Torah, all right? Everything that Moses wrote down, the majority of all of that, God provided that for them. So they'd have that during exile, and they clung to that. Their traditions, do you remember when God was saying, I want you to celebrate this. I want you to celebrate that on the such and such day of such and such month. You're going to celebrate that. These things were hooks. They were pegs that the Israelite people could hook on and keep their identity, their family lines. Okay, so that all of this reading of all of their names throughout the whole entire first major section of the Old Testament, those family lines were not for naught. They were hooks, they were pegs for the Israelites to hang their hat on, to hold on to keep them together and bonded together. So when we're like going, oh, Snoozeville, you know, who begot who and whose son was that and whose son was that? Well, these were things that they took pride in. They were, you know, not in a bad sense. I would hope not. Maybe some of them had negative prideful thoughts in their heart about the tribes and their family lines. But these were things that grounded them. All these things were anchors that held them down while they were in exile. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you see the importance of everything that we've read so far? And then finally, connections to the land of Israel. Their connections to the land of Israel. These were the things that helped them through all of their exile from Assyria and Babylon, coming back. And then, you know, we have the Roman Empire, and then we have kind of how they're just over time, over the centuries, just displaced and scattered all around the world, scattered to the north, the south, and the east and the west. I will bring them back, says the God, from the north and the south and the east and the west. I will bring my children back. Before for millennia, thousands of years, they were scattered. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself now. Okay, after the Babylonian exile, many Jews return. They go back and they rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. And even after later conquests by Rome and long periods of dispersion, the Jewish people continued as a distinct people group for thousands of years. They did not have their nation Israel. I didn't do history on that, so if you know history about that, and if I am, I can say this: they were not the nation Israel. Okay, hang with me here. They continued as a distinct people group. Why? Because of their religion, because of their scripture, because of their family lines, because of their traditions. And they might not have been in the land, but they felt a connection to the land. Why? Because God said that it was their land. God said, I am giving you this land. This is my covenant to you. This is your land. Hang with me, we're almost done. Okay. Because they were able to keep this for 2,000 years, from the time Jesus Christ died and the time that the Romans, and they slowly start going out, and now we're moving through time, we're moving through the Middle Ages, we're moving through the Renaissance period. Europe is coming up. Spain is kicking them out in the 1400s. God is sending Columbus away from Spain, ironically, to discover a new continent, a new land, a land that's going to be developed into the United States of America, which is going to eventually welcome the Jewish people into it, where the Jewish people can live safely and they can practice their Jewish religion and their Jewish faith, and they can be safe in America until the time that God starts calling them home in the year, a little bit before, but specifically, I'm just going to go into 1948, when this ancient people group, this ancient nation of Israel, does something that no other ancient people groups has been able to do, and that is restore themselves as a nation. Are you getting as excited as I am inside my skin right now? And that is one reason why many people see the establishment of the modern state of Israel on May 14th, put it on your calendar, 1948, as unique in history. A people group that had been scattered for centuries still preserved its identity and its language, its native language. Hebrew is spoken fluently in Israel, and re-established a nation in its ancestral homeland. They didn't need to do it in the United States. They didn't do it in Europe. They didn't take over places in Africa. They go back to the ancestral homeland and they re-establish their nation, their culture, their heritage, their religion, their language in their ancestral homeland. May 17th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, I think I pronounced his name maybe a little bit incorrectly, but establishes and declares that Israel is now an independent nation and established as a nation. So this year, on May 14th, put it on your calendar and your phone, put it on a sticky note, put it somewhere so that on May 14th, you can celebrate and rejoice with Israel as they celebrate their 78th year as an independent, re-established nation. This is big. Every year it's big. I mean, even since they got re-established as a nation in 1948, there have been groups and countries all over the planet who have been trying to completely eradicate and annihilate the Jewish nation, the Jewish people. Well, I shouldn't say the Jewish nation, the nation of Israel and the Jewish people from our planet. Hitler, boom, okay, right there, number one. But what happens after World War II? Israel is reestablished as a nation. It just blows my mind. So, in closing, let me say this. Psalm 108 is basically, Psalm 108 is basically a psalm that declares God's authority. God says, these places, these tribes belong to me. And that is why he says things like, Gilead is mine, and Judah is my scepter. Ephraim is pictured as a helmet because it was a strong military tribe. Judah is pictured as the scepter because kings, including David and down the line Jesus, came from Judah. If you remember, Ephraim, he was the youngest son of Jacob and the youngest son of Joseph and the grandson of Jacob. You remember? Jacob took Ephraim and his brother Manasseh, and he gave each of them a blessing. Even though Ephraim was Joseph's younger son, Grandpa Jacob gave Ephraim the greater blessing over his older brother Manasseh. And because of that, the tribe of Ephraim became one of the most important tribes of Israel, right along with Judah. The tribe of Ephraim later settled in central Israel and became very influential. Eventually, Ephraim was sometimes used as another name for the northern kingdom of Israel because the tribe was so dominant there. I don't know why I read that to you, but that was in my notes. I think I was in a really good place in wrapping this up. The point is that what we know about these ancient lands, Moab, Edom, and Philistia, is that David couldn't see this. God prophesied it. But all three of those ancient people groups eventually disappeared. And they are not people groups today. But the ancient land of Israel, which was there with them, sustained and lasted, and 2,000 years later, say it with me so you get this locked in your brain, on May 14th, 1948, was declared an independent nation once again. Amazing. Amazing. I hope that David knows this. I hope that he's got the inside scoop. And that's what I wanted to take you into wading deeper with me. So when we read about these ancient lands and David crying out and crying out, we can look back and we can see how it all turned out and how God's word was completely true. God was completely true to his word. All right, my friends, there it is. I love you and thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening. And I will see you as we wade a little bit deeper into today's reading. God bless you.